Hey, David Brewster here with a new episode of 3 for All. This is 3 Gus G Licks from 2010, and I've had a ton of requests to finally feature this fiery guitarist here on the channel. This is long overdue, and I have to be honest, compared to the other players that worked with Ozzy Osbourne, the one that I know the least about is Gus G. I know a lot about Tony and Randy and Jakey Lee and Zakk Wylde and even Joe Holmes, but I honestly didn't really know that much about Gus. I've heard the album, Scream that he recorded with Ozzy. I've also heard some Firewind and some of his solo material, but I'm attempting to catch up and kind of remedy this issue in this lesson and pay tribute to Gus and also obviously Ozzy Osbourne, the late great Prince of Darkness. So if you're a Gus G fan, Ozzy Osbourne fan, or a player just looking for some cool licks, this lesson's totally for you. So Gus worked with Ozzy from 2009 until 2017. The album Scream came out in 2010. There was also a live album, I think, that came out in 2010 featuring Gus. But then you have to remember, Black Sabbath reformed in 2011. And that kind of just went back and forth. And Ozzy kind of put his solo band on hold or on the back burner and focused on reforming Sabbath. And I know that was kind of frustrating for Gus. You got to think, like, getting the Ozzy gig, that's got to feel like winning the lottery. But then he really only had like a year or two, and then Ozzy's focus was on Black Sabbath, not, the solo band. And eventually they parted ways. Zakk came back into the group, I think around 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. But I always found that interesting that Gus got the gig, but then Black Sabbath kind of eclipsed, him working with Ozzy. And then aside from his solo material and also working with Ozzy Osbourne, there's an assortment of different bands and artists that Gus has worked with. Bruce Dickinson, Arch Enemy, Dream Evil. There's a lot of different groups. Here's an image with some of the people that Gus G's worked with in his career. So I wanted to include this in this video because I get messages and comments about the shirts I wear in these videos, and I wanted to share this because ever since Ozzy passed, I've been looking for an Ozzy Osbourne shirt. I do have a great Black Sabbath shirt, but I wanted an Ozzy shirt. And I couldn't find one. I mean, I literally went to Target, Walmart, Spencer's, Hot Topic, record stores. I went a whole bunch of different places. And then today, actually this morning, I went to Old Navy because I saw on their website they had Ozzy shirts. And I found this, it was on sale for 12 bucks. It's got the old like ketchup and mustard logo, which is what I wanted. So if you're looking for an Ozzy shirt like I was, run out to Old Navy and grab these before they're gone. So the licks and ideas shared in this lesson actually came from a live concert in 2010, and it was Ozzy Osbourne's birthday concert. And they played a Black Sabbath song at one point, and then the crowd sang Happy Birthday to Ozzy, which was really cool. And that's where the licks, this was kind of Gus G's solo spot during that concert, and that's where these licks came from, so just a heads up. The first lick's this Blurry bend-n-legato idea. It's pretty cool. Something like this. Something like that. One more time. Something like that. So this lick starts with that shift and you're moving into E minor pentatonic, sliding into that E, grab that G, and then go back to that E note and pick it quickly 3 times. Like that. Then go back to that G and grab A, and then you're going to smear bend that A. And this is where the lick starts, this kind of smeared or blurry, bending part. And he's doing this E, and then he's pulling off this D note to B, and then he's doing that smear bend in that A, kind of bending it up to B. And he kind of like separates and kind of and spreads them out at first, then he starts going faster, so there is like an accelerando. And with that accelerando, be sure to start slow, and then you gradually get faster. And then after that part, then you'll notice like he shifts into like this pull-off pattern. And it looks like Gus is doing like this upstroke sweep, right there. Now to be honest, typically I do play licks like that, but I do it like this, kind of a stretch legato. Like that instead of could also tab that too. So I typically do this kind of stretch approach, you know, where you have 3 notes on one string and then 1 on the G right there. And then Gus is doing the same thing, but he's doing it like that. And that's harder, I think, to keep clean because you've got, you know, 1 note on the high E, you know, you got this picked, you know, D note pulling off to that B, and then a picked A note on the G. So you have 4 notes spread out over 3 strings, and there's a pull off in there too. Like that. And that's tricky to keep clean and to make it, you know, sound as smooth as Gus does right here. This is really impressive. Okay, next up we've got this position shifting slip and slide idea. This is really cool, like this. One more time. So I picked up slip and slide ideas like this from John Petrucci. He did kind of break some of these down in some of his educational material, like in Guitar World and some of his books and stuff. And I suspect that might be where Gus kind of picked this idea up too. Maybe he learned it from Petrucci. But right there, we're sliding fifths, basically. And that's what it looks and sounds like. Slow, one more time. And it's tricky, once again, because you're gliding and kind of shifting as you're producing these sounds. So you're going to slide into this 19th fret and grab the 22nd fret right there, and you're going to do that twice, like that. And then when you get back to that 19, that's where you shift back to 17 to that E note, and then you pick up that B right there. And then take that, move that down, and shift slide down a whole step down to that D note, and then grab that A, like that. Then you're going to go back up to that E, grab that B, go back down to D, grab that A, grab that D and go down to C and grab that G, and then shift up to that D, grab A, shift down to B and end on F sharp right there. Like that. And you also have to lift your fingers up to kind of mute the notes because you don't want those notes to bleed into each other. You want to separate the notes you're playing on the B from the notes you're playing on the high E, like that. You know, really cool lick. Okay, next up we have this dominant pentatonic based idea, and this is really cool, like this. One more time. So this is based around E dominant pentatonic. We've talked about dominant pentatonic scales, you know, here on the channel before. Just think of E minor pentatonic, but raise the thirds. So for E minor pentatonic, change the G's to G sharps, and you're there. So instead of this, we're doing this. There's E dominant pentatonic, and that's what Gus is targeting, you know, in this lick. So play the low E open, let it ring, grab this D note, bend that to E with some vibrato and authority. And then right there, and it's really interesting the way it's sequenced, because he's starting, you know, after that bend, he's coming down, and then he's grabbing that D to A right there. Like that. And then off that E note, grab that A right there. So that's really cool, and I think you should definitely practice that, you know, like the descending part first, and do this. And then get used to doing the ascending part separate. Practice it like in pieces like that, the first half and the second half, and you put them together. It's a really cool lick. Okay, here's a bonus lick, and this is definitely really like a show-stopping guitar solo moment. This showy, flashy kind of thing. So he's doing an accelerando in the beginning. Once again, you know, we had that earlier, where you start slow and you start going faster. And he does like the overhand kind of dampening or muting, and then he starts doing just pure legato in this really cool scale run. So he actually starts really slow and does this gradual slide into this high F right there, like that. And then you hear him literally go, like, pull off and then hammer on with that little 3-note pattern right there. Right? So after that legato move there, when you get back to that D note, that's where you're going to start this sequence. I actually originally learned this sequence from Richie Kotzen. I think he broke this down in his instructional video back in the day. I'm not sure where Gus picked this up from, but it's this sequence. And he starts doing the accelerando right there on that. He starts it real slow and then starts going, you know, just brutally fast. And then he does the overhand dampening or muting right here, and then he starts racing through. It's basically a half-whole diminished scale implied like this. And that's basically the scale he's targeting, and he's descending using that sequence. So he's basically doing something like this. Or something like that. And so basically, you know, start with that real slow slide, and then you're descending with pull-offs, and then ascending with hammer-ons, and then back down to that D note. And then right there, start that Richie Kotzen sequence. And so he just starts racing that legato pattern, and then he's cruising down that scale. But he's basically, you know, stopping on that high E and repeating that sequence. Then he just does it once right there on the B string. And then move to the G string, and you're going to that shape, that F, E, and D. And then you want to hang on that one and repeat it over and over. And then go to the D string and do that one once. And then the A string right there, there's that F, E, and D, and you want to repeat that one over and over. And then one more. And then you hear Gus like doing these like chunky, you know, power chords. You know, or something like that. And like I said, it's this big like show-off moment during a solo, like, check this out. And of course he milks that initial slide and then kind of slowly starts to accelerate, and then he's just full-on shredding by the end. But something like this. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of 3 for All with this look at 3 Gus G Licks from 2010. Definitely a dynamite, fiery guitarist with lots of cool licks and tricks up his sleeve, for sure. And I'm slowly kind of checking out, you know, his music and kind of becoming more aware of him and where he's coming from. Because like I admitted earlier, Gus was the one that I really wasn't that familiar with. And, I mean, no offense to him, there's tons of players and bands and albums and songs and solos that I just still haven't heard yet for whatever reason. I just haven't made it there. I mean, there's tons of stuff that I have checked out and either learned or taught or whatever. But for whatever reason, Gus was one of those players I just really hadn't gone there. And now I'm glad I did. So I want to thank the viewers out there for requesting him. You've been methodically, you know, patiently asking for Gus G for years. And now I finally paid tribute to him and, of course, the late great Ozzy Osbourne. And I do have more Ozzy-related material coming as a tribute. I have some really big things coming, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, please subscribe to Laying Out Lessons, leave some comments and feedback, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.